The night was heavy with smoke and whispers. In the alien city of Karen, thousands gathered around the high court. A girl was being dragged in chains, her wrists raw from iron cuffs. She did not resist. Her head bowed low. Her name was Leora, a young alien woman who once dreamed of studying stars. But dreams had no place in a world ruled by debt. The guards pushed her forward. Their armor clashed loudly, echoing against the marble pillars. The crowd leaned closer, eager to hear her sentence. Some muttered cruel words, others shook their heads in pity. Debt in Karen was not forgiven. It was punished. The law was brutal. And tonight the city wanted blood. Or something worse. At the top of the stone steps sat the debt magistrate. His eyes were cold, his voice sharper than any blade. He unrolled the parchment of her crimes. The words struck like knives. Failure to pay her debts, theft of borrowed credits, defiance of repayment. The truth, however, was different. Leora had been tricked. Her step-family had forged papers in her name, but no one cared for the truth. Justice in Karen served only the powerful. The magistrate raised his hand. The crowd grew silent. For her unpaid debts, he declared, she shall be punished in the ancient way. 10 men shall claim her in one night rented by coin until her debt is settled. His words rolled across the square like thunder. The crowd gasped, some in shock, some in excitement. Leora trembled, her lips parted, but no sound escaped. She wanted to scream, to beg, but her throat was dry. Her chest burned with shame, her tears dropped silently to the ground. To the court she was no longer a person. She was only property, a debt to be collected. Among the sweeping brooms and piles of ash stood a human janitor named Kale. He worked late in the court, sweeping after every trial. Kale was tall, his hands scarred from years of labor. His uniform was plain, but his eyes carried a quiet fire. Tonight, as he swept near the back pillars, he saw her. Something inside him tightened. He had seen many punished in Karen, thieves whipped, beggars branded, liars thrown into mines, but never had he seen such cruelty. Never had he seen someone sentenced to be broken in such a way. His broom slowed. His breath grew heavy. The guards dragged Leora down the steps. Chains clinked against the stone. The crowd pressed closer, throwing insults and rotten fruit. She stumbled, nearly falling. One guard laughed, yanking her by the hair to keep her upright. Her cry cut through the air like a wounded bird. Kale's hands curled into fists around the broom. He wanted to shout, to step forward, but he could not. A janitor was invisible. He was meant to clean, not to speak. If he dared to interfere, the court would crush him too. Yet the fire in his chest only grew stronger. They led Leora into the punishment chamber, a dark hall lit with torches. The heavy iron door slammed shut. Behind her, the crowd began to disperse, whispering about the night ahead. Some shook their heads with pity. Others smiled with cruel hunger. Kyle stayed behind, sweeping slowly. His eyes lingered on the chamber door. He imagined the girl inside, alone, terrified. He could almost hear her sobs through the thick walls. His heart pounded. He did not know why, but he could not look away. Inside, Leora sat on the cold floor. Her chains rattled as she hugged her knees. Her breath shook. She felt the weight of the world pressing on her shoulders. She whispered to herself, I am not a thing. I am not a thing. But the echo of the magistrate's words haunted her. The first man would come soon, she knew this. Her body trembled with fear. The thought made her stomach twist. Every second felt like an eternity. She wondered if anyone in the city cared, if anyone would see her as more than debt. Kyle leaned on his broom, staring at the torchlight flickering under the chamber door. He told himself to leave, to go home, to forget this girl. Yet his feet refused to move. He felt something strange, a pull he could not explain. The punishment was law, but laws could be broken. Kale's jaw tightened. His chest rose and fell like a storm. He was only a janitor. But in this moment, he felt the weight of a choice pressing on him. Stay silent, or change her fate. Outside, the city bells tolled midnight. The punishment was about to begin. The first key turned in the lock of the chamber door. Leora lifted her head, her heart pounding in her ears. She braced herself for pain, for shame, for the end of hope. But she did not know, not yet, that the first man to step through that door would not be like the others. He would not see her as a punishment. He would see her as a person, and that single choice would change both of their lives forever. The iron door groaned as the key turned. The sound cut through the silence like a blade. Inside, Leora's heart hammered against her chest. She pulled her knees closer, her body shivering though the air was warm. She was no longer a daughter, no longer a dreamer, only a debt, a punishment, waiting to be broken by strangers. The door creaked open and torchlight spilled into the chamber. A shadow stretched across the stone floor, heavy, tall, and silent. Leora bit her lip until she tasted blood. Her body screamed to shrink into the wall, to disappear, but the chains rattled loudly as she moved. There was no escape. The first man stepped in. His boots echoed against the stones. His face was half hidden by the hood of his cloak, but his eyes caught the firelight. They were not cruel, not hungry, but filled with something else. Hesitation. He shut the door behind him, leaving them in the dim torchlight. Leora trembled. She expected his hands to grab her, rough and demanding. She waited for laughter, for insults, for the humiliation she had been promised. But nothing came. Instead, the man stood there quietly, watching her. His breathing was steady. His presence filled the room, but it did not crush her. "Don't be afraid," the man said softly. His voice was deep but gentle. Leora blinked in shock. Was this some cruel trick? The words seemed out of place in this chamber of punishment. She did not reply. Her throat was tight with fear. The man slowly reached into his cloak. Leora flinched, expecting chains, whips, or some tool of cruelty. But instead, he pulled out a folded piece of cloth, a cloak, worn but clean. He knelt down and placed it over her shoulders. The warmth spread across her trembling body. She stared at him with wide eyes. "I don't want to hurt you," he whispered. His eyes met hers, steady and unflinching. For the first time tonight, she saw something she thought was lost. Kindness. It frightened her more than cruelty, because she did not know how to believe it. Leora shook her head, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Why?" she whispered, her voice cracking. "Why are you doing this?" Her words echoed in the empty chamber. She wanted to push him away, yet her chains held her close. The man's name was Kale, the janitor who had watched her trial. He had slipped the guards a coin, pretending to be the first man on the list. His heart had burned when he saw her sentenced, and he could not stand by. Now here he was facing her, breaking every rule. Kale took a slow breath. "Because this is wrong," he said. His hand trembled slightly as he touched the chain on her wrist. His fingers brushed her skin, warm and human against her cold flesh. She flinched again, but this time not from fear. The touch was different, careful, almost protective. "You should hate me," she whispered. "I am nothing but debt." Her voice cracked as she lowered her head. The shame weighed on her like a mountain. Her chains clinked as her tears fell onto the stone floor. Kale shook his head firmly. "You are not debt," he said. "You are not punishment, you are a person." His voice carried no doubt, only fire. His words cut through the air, sharper than the magistrate's sentence. Leora looked up, her breath unsteady. For the first time, she allowed herself to truly see him. His face was scarred, his hands calloused. He was no noble, no soldier, only a worker. Yet his eyes burned with something greater. He was risking everything by standing here. The silence grew heavy, broken only by the sound of distant guards moving in the hall. Kale leaned closer, his voice low. "If you trust me, I can get you out." His words were dangerous, reckless, and yet filled with hope. Leora's heart twisted. Could she believe him? Could she take such a risk? The thought of 9 more men entering this chamber filled her with dread. Her body ached with fear, her soul ached with shame. If there was even a single chance, could she refuse it? Kyle reached into his belt and pulled out a small tool, a thin rod bent at the tip. His hands moved quickly to her cuffs. The sound of metal scraping echoed softly. She gasped, her chains loosened. One by one, the cuffs clicked open. Her wrists were free for the first time in months. Her breath came fast. She looked at her hands in disbelief. "Why?" she asked again, her voice trembling. "Why risk yourself?" Kyle's jaw tightened. He thought of the faces he had seen punished before, the cruelty of the court, the broken bodies left behind. He thought of his own silence, of the years he had watched without speaking. Tonight he could no longer stay quiet. "Because you don't deserve this," he said. His eyes held hers, steady and strong. "And because if I walk away now, I'll never forgive myself." The sound of boots echoed outside. Growing louder, Cale's head turned sharply. Time was running out. He grabbed her hand, rough but steady, pulling her to her feet. "Stay close," he whispered. His eyes narrowed, his voice firm. "From this moment on, you're not alone." Leora's legs trembled, but she let him pull her up. Her chains slipped from her arms and clattered to the floor. The noise echoed through the chamber. The boots outside stopped. Silence fell for a moment. Then, the guards began to shout. Cale's grip tightened on her hand. "We have to move now," he whispered. His body shifted, ready to fight or run. The torchlight flickered wildly. The chamber felt smaller, suffocating. Leora's breath came fast. Fear still burned in her chest, but something else stirred beneath it, a spark of hope. She looked at Kyle, at the man who should have claimed her but instead chose to free her. For the first time since her sentence began, she felt the faintest taste of freedom. The door rattled as hands pounded against it. Voices shouted orders. The lock began to turn again. Kyle pulled her close, his voice low and fierce. "Trust me. Whatever happens," Leora nodded, tears on her cheeks, her heart racing. The first door had opened to punishment, but instead it had opened to something else. Defiance, compassion, and the first steps of a dangerous escape. The chamber shook as fists pounded against the iron door. The guards shouted, their voices sharp and full of suspicion. Kyle's grip on Leora's hand tightened. His eyes scanned the small room, searching for another way out. The walls were stone, thick and unbroken. There was no other door. Only the single way they had come in. Leora's breath came in short gasps. She stared at him with wide eyes. "They'll kill you," she whispered, her voice cracked with panic. "They'll kill us both." Her hands trembled as she tried to pull away, but Cale held firm. His expression was calm, but his heart thundered inside his chest. "I know the risk," Kyle said, his voice low and steady. "But I won't let them touch you again." His words carried no hesitation, no fear. They were a promise, simple and unbreakable. The lock on the door rattled. Torches burned brighter outside. Cale moved quickly, pulling Leora to the far side of the chamber. He pushed her against the wall and whispered, "Stay low, stay quiet." She obeyed, crouching against the cold stone. The door swung open and two guards stormed in. Their blades glinted in the torchlight. Their eyes narrowed as they saw Cale standing in the middle of the chamber. One of them barked, "Where's the girl?" His gaze swept across the room, but Cale stepped forward, blocking the view. "She fainted," Cale said quickly. His tone was sharp, confident. He had heard the way overseers lied before. He mimicked their authority. "She is no use if broken. I was told to prepare her for the next man." The guards frowned, exchanging glances. The taller one sneered. "Strange orders," he muttered. "But not our concern." He waved to the other. "We'll check later, hurry. The next client is waiting." Cale nodded stiffly, keeping his body between them and Leora. He forced his voice to remain firm. "Leave her to me. I'll handle it." The guards hesitated, then shrugged and turned away. The door slammed shut, again, and their footsteps faded into the hall. Leora let out a shaky breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Her whole body quivered as she whispered, "You lied for me." Her eyes glistened, disbelief mixing with fear. She had expected betrayal, but instead, he had shielded her. Cale knelt beside her, his hands gentle as he touched her shoulder. "I'll do more than lie," he said. "I'll get you out." His jaw clenched with resolve. His decision was made. There was no turning back now. Leora shook her head. Why risk everything for me? She asked again. Her voice was soft, almost broken. You don't even know me. The weight of her shame pressed down on her. She believed herself to be nothing, no one worth saving. Cale met her gaze, his eyes steady. I don't need to know you, he said firmly. I know this is wrong. I know you don't deserve it. That's enough. His words struck her like lightning, breaking through the chains of despair around her heart. The sound of footsteps returned, heavier this time. The next man was coming. Kyle's time was running out. He glanced around, searching the walls again. His eyes landed on a grate high above the torch sconces. A vent, small but wide, enough for someone thin. He looked at Leora. Can you climb? He asked quickly. She stared at the vent, then at her weak, trembling hands. I don't know, she whispered. I've been chained for too long. Cale pressed her hand firmly. Then I'll lift you. The lock on the chamber door rattled again. Cale moved fast, lifting Leora into his arms. Her chains rattled as he raised her higher. She reached for the grate, her fingers scraping against the metal. With a grunt, she pulled, and the cover loosened. The sound echoed, but there was no time for silence. Go, Kyle urged, his voice sharp with urgency. She hesitated, looking down at him. Her eyes burned with tears. What about you? She whispered. They'll kill you if they find you here. Cale smiled faintly, though his heart was heavy. Don't worry about me, he said. I'll follow. He gave her another push, and she disappeared into the vent. The shadows swallowed her form. The chains no longer clinked. Only silence remained. The door slammed open, and the next man entered. His steps were slow, confident. He looked around the chamber, frowning. Where is she? He demanded. His eyes narrowed at Cale. Cale stood tall, his jaw tight. She's not ready, he said. His voice was low but defiant. The man sneered, stepping closer. Then make her ready, or I will. His hand reached for the whip at his side. Cale's fists clenched. His blood roared in his ears. He had sworn to himself, never to fight again, never to draw attention. But now he faced a choice. He could step aside, obey, and let her be broken, or he could resist and risk death. He took a deep breath. His decision was made. He moved like a storm, his fist striking the man across the jaw. The whip clattered to the floor. The man staggered, back with a cry. The sound echoed through the chamber. Outside, guards shouted, rushing toward the noise. Cale's chest heaved. His heart pounded. He knew what was coming, but as he looked at the vent above, where Leora had vanished, hope flared inside him. He whispered under his breath, Run, little star, run as far as you can. Then he braced himself, ready to face the storm that would follow. The vent was narrow and dark. Dust clung to the damp stone as Leora crawled through. Her wrists ached where the cuffs had rubbed her skin raw. Her knees scraped against the metal edges. Every breath came short and shallow, but she forced herself forward. The sounds of shouts and heavy boots echoed behind her, but she could not stop. Cale's voice lingered in her mind, strong and steady. Run, little star, he had said. She repeated the words silently, as if they were a shield. She did not understand why this human would risk everything for her, but his courage had lit something inside her, a flame she thought was gone. Behind the chamber walls, Cale fought. His fists struck hard, fueled by anger and desperation. The guard reeled, but more footsteps thundered closer. Cale knew he could not hold them off for long. Still, he gave everything he had. Every second he delayed meant more distance for Leora. The vent twisted upward, forcing Leora to climb. Her weak arms trembled, but she pulled herself higher. The sound of steel clashing echoed faintly from below. Her heart ached. She wanted to look back, to see if Cale was safe, but she pushed forward. She could not waste his sacrifice. Finally, the vent opened into the outer court. A cold wind swept over her as she pushed aside the iron grate. She tumbled out onto the cobblestones, gasping. The night air smelled of smoke and rain. Her chains rattled softly as she crawled to her feet. The courtyard was empty for now, but torches flickered along the walls. Shadows moved in the distance. The guards were searching. She pressed herself against the cold stone, her breath ragged. She had to keep moving. A voice rang out behind her, sharp and commanding. "She's loose." A horn blew, its mournful cry cutting through the night. Bells clanged in answer. The whole city was waking to the hunt. Leora's legs shook as she ran. Her bare feet slapped against the stones. The ground was rough, cutting her skin, but she didn't stop. The streets twisted like a maze, narrow alleys and broken bridges. She stumbled past shuttered shops and silent houses, her chains clinking like a curse. From the shadows, a hand grabbed. "Her," she screamed, but the hand pressed against her mouth. "Quiet," a familiar voice whispered. Her wide eyes blinked, and she saw Cale, his face bruised, blood at the corner of his lip, but his eyes were steady. "How?" she whispered when he released her. Her voice shook with disbelief. He should have been caught, beaten, or worse. Yet here he stood, strong and unyielding. "I know these halls," he said, his breath heavy but determined. "I've worked in them for years. I know every vent, every corner. Come on." He pulled her forward, his hand firm but gentle. The horns blared again, closer now. Torches swept across the streets, guards shouted orders. Their armor clattered as they closed in. Kyle pulled her into a narrow passage between two crumbling walls. They pressed against the stone as soldiers rushed past. Their shadows flickered over Leora's face. Her heart raced so hard she thought it might burst. When the soldiers were gone, Cale whispered, "We need to get out of the city." His eyes scanned the rooftops, searching for a path. Leora's breath caught. "Out," she whispered. "But the gates are guarded." Cale nodded. "Yes. But there are other ways, hidden ones. I've used them before." He led her through winding alleys, their footsteps muffled by the dirt and rubble. The city was alive with the sound of the hunt. Dogs barked in the distance, chains rattled, soldiers shouted. Every step felt like walking on the edge of a blade. If they were caught, there would be no mercy. But Cale's grip on her hand never wavered. He moved with purpose, his eyes sharp, as if he had planned this escape long ago. They ducked into an abandoned warehouse, broken crates piled against the walls. Cale shut the rotting door behind them. The air smelled of mildew and dust. Leora collapsed against a crate, her chest heaving. Sweat dripped down her face. "Why?" she asked again, her voice breaking. "Why do this for me?" She looked at him with eyes full of confusion and pain. "You should have walked away. You should have let me be." Cale knelt beside her. His expression was fierce, but his voice was soft. "Because no one else will," he said. "Because you're not what they say, you're not a debt, you're not property, you deserve better, and I'll fight to give you that." Her lips trembled. She wanted to believe him, but years of cruelty had taught her doubt. Still, his words sank deep, warming a part of her soul that had long been frozen. Suddenly, the warehouse door rattled. Voices shouted outside. Cale's eyes darted around, searching. He spotted a trapdoor beneath a pile of crates. He yanked the wood aside and pulled it open, revealing a dark tunnel that smelled of earth. "Down here," he whispered urgently. Leora hesitated, the darkness yawning before her. "Trust me," Kyle said, his hand extended toward her, strong and steady. Her heart pounded, but she took his hand. They slipped into the tunnel, the trapdoor closing above them. Darkness swallowed them whole. Only Cale's steady breath guided her. The shouts outside grew louder, boots pounding against the warehouse floor. The guards had found the place, but Cale and Leora were already gone. As they crept deeper into the tunnel, the air grew damp and cold. The walls dripped with water. The passage twisted like a serpent beneath the city. Each step took them farther. From the punishment chamber, farther from the chains, Leora's hand brushed against Cale's in the dark. His warmth was steady. She whispered softly, "You don't even know me, but you're saving me." Cale's reply was quiet but firm. "Sometimes you don't need to know someone to know they deserve freedom." The tunnel stretched ahead, endless and uncertain. But in Leora's heart, a fragile hope began to bloom. For the first time, she was not running alone. For the first time, escape felt possible. The city of Charon did not sleep that night. Horns echoed from every tower. Bells clanged in warning. The sound of boots thundered through the streets as guards marched in formation. Torches blazed, their flames chasing. Away Shadow's posters with Leora's face were nailed to wooden walls. The words beneath her image called her a fugitive, a criminal. Leora and Kale moved through the hidden tunnel, their steps slow and cautious. The air was thick with damp soil and dripping water. The silence of the underground path only made the noise above seem louder. Leora clutched her cloak tightly around her shoulders. Her hands shook not only from fear but from exhaustion. Kale's face was grim. His eyes scanned the darkness as if he could see danger even where none appeared. He had guided himself through these tunnels many times while working late. He knew which ones led to the river, which led to dead ends, and which surfaced in the outer districts, but tonight the path felt narrower, the weight heavier. "Do you hear them?" Leora whispered. Her voice cracked. The sound of dogs barking carried faintly through the stone. Kale nodded. "They're hunting us," he said quietly. "They'll search every street, every home. They won't stop until they find you, her." Heart sank. "Because of me, you're in danger too," she whispered. Her throat burned with guilt. Kyle looked at her sharply. "No," he said firmly. "This isn't because of you. It's because of them. Their laws, their cruelty. Don't carry their burden." The tunnel opened into an abandoned storage hall beneath the marketplace. Dust covered broken barrels and rusted tools. Rats scurried into corners at the sound of their arrival. Kyle pushed aside a wooden board, revealing a small gap where torchlight leaked through. He peered out carefully. Above them, the marketplace was alive with soldiers. Their armor clattered as they searched stalls, kicked open doors, and shouted orders. Merchants begged them to leave their goods untouched, but no mercy was given. The city was a net, and Kale and Leora were the prey. Leora sank onto a broken crate. Her chest heaved as she tried to catch her breath. Her body still ached from chains, and crawling through stone, she closed her eyes for a moment, but the sound of horns jolted her back. There was no rest. Kyle crouched in front of her, his face close, his voice calm, though danger pressed all around. "Listen to me," he said. "We can make it, but only if we stay ahead of them. You must keep moving, even when your body tells you to stop." She opened her eyes, meeting his gaze. His words lit a spark inside her, fragile but real. She nodded, though tears clung to the edges of her lashes. "I'll try," she whispered. Kale gave her a faint smile. "Not try," he said. "Do it." Suddenly, footsteps pounded overhead. Shouts grew louder. The soldiers were closing in. Kale grabbed her hand and pulled her toward another tunnel, narrower than the last. They slipped inside just as boots stomped above the storage hall. The soldiers' voices echoed. "Check everywhere. They can't have gone far." The tunnel twisted sharply, forcing them to crawl at times. Leora's breath came fast. Her hand scraped against the rough ground. Sweat dripped down her face. Kale crawled ahead, guiding her, whispering, "Almost there, just a little farther." At last, the tunnel sloped upward. Faint moonlight filtered through cracks above. Kale pushed aside a grate and the two emerged into the outer district of Charon. The air smelled of damp wood and smoke. Crumbling houses leaned against each other, broken roofs exposing the sky. Here the people were poorer, forgotten by the court. Yet even here danger prowled. Guards moved through the alleys, their torches bright. Dogs sniffed the ground, pulling at chains. Kale pulled Leora into the shadow of a collapsed wall. His body shielded hers. She pressed close, her heart hammering. The dogs barked, dragging their handlers toward the corner. Kale held his breath, his hand pressed gently over Leora's trembling lips. The guards cursed, pulling the dogs back, muttering about wasted time. At last they moved on. Their torches faded into the dark. Leora's knees buckled. She nearly collapsed, but Kale caught her, his arm steady. His eyes searched her face. "You're still with me," he whispered. She nodded weakly, her voice barely audible. "Only because of you." They slipped deeper, into the outer district, hiding among ruins and shadows. Every step was hunted, every sound threatened to reveal them. But Kale never let go of her hand. guiding her with certainty. His eyes burned with determination. At last, they found an old storage hall near the river, its roof half collapsed, its doors hanging loose. Kyle led her inside. He pushed debris against the entrance to conceal them. The air was damp and smelled of mold. But it was shelter, Leora sank against. The wall, her body trembling, Kyle knelt beside her, his rough hand brushing lightly against her arm. "We'll rest for a moment," he said. His voice was low, gentle, but beneath it was steel. "But only a moment. They're still close." Leora gazed at him, her chest heavy with emotion. "Why do you care so much?" she asked softly. "You could have left me. You could have lived your life in peace." Her words were not angry, only filled with confusion and wonder. Kale looked away, his jaw tight, his eyes dark with memories. "I've seen too many broken by their laws," he said. "I've watched from the shadows, silent, sweeping the floors while others suffered. I told myself I was powerless. But tonight, when I saw you, I couldn't stay silent anymore." His words cut deep into her heart. For the first time, she began to see herself not as a curse, not as a debt, but as someone worth saving. She leaned her head against the wall, whispering, "Thank you." Outside, the horn sounded again, closer this time. The hunt had not ended. It was only beginning. Kale stood, his silhouette strong against the flickering light from outside. "They'll never stop," he said quietly. "Not until you're theirs again. That's why we must keep moving farther than they can reach." Leora looked up at him. Her fear was still there. But beneath it, something new had begun to grow. Trust, fragile and trembling, but real. She rose to her feet, her body weak, but her spirit no longer broken. "The hunt continues," Kale whispered. "But now they'll find we're not the prey." The old storage hall by the river was dark and damp. Rain leaked through the broken roof, dripping onto the wooden floor. Leora sat against the wall, her knees drawn close. Her body ached from running, her lungs burned with every breath. She could still hear the distant horns, the endless call of the hunt. Kale stood near the doorway, peering through a crack. His eyes scanned the street beyond. Torches flickered in the distance. Shadows moved across the ruined district. The guards were spreading wider, tightening their net. Kyle knew it was only a matter of time before they closed in. "We can't stay here much longer," he whispered. His voice was steady, but his jaw was tight. Leora looked up at him, her eyes tired but still burning with fear. "Where will we go?" she asked. Her voice cracked as the words left her lips. Kyle glanced at her. "Beyond the river, there's forest. Too wild for their hounds, too broken for their armies." The thought of leaving the city filled her with both hope and dread. The river was fast and violent. Crossing it at night would be madness, but staying meant chains. Leora closed her eyes, her body trembling. "I'll follow you," she whispered. "Even if it kills me." Kale's heart clenched. He had expected resistance, fear, maybe even despair. But her words carried trust. Fragile yet fierce. He gave her a small nod. "Then we move soon," he said. A crash sounded outside. Soldiers kicked down doors, shouting orders. The hunt was closer. Kale pulled Leora to her feet. "Stay behind me," he said. His grip tightened. On her hand, they slipped out through a side door, stepping into the rain-soaked streets. The outer district was alive with chaos. Soldiers moved in pairs, their armor clanking. Dogs strained against chains, sniffing the ground. The rain made everything slick, water splashing beneath their steps. Leora clung to Kale's cloak, her heart racing. Every torch felt like fire. Against her skin, every shout felt like a blade at her throat. They moved quickly, weaving through broken alleys and collapsed bridges. The sound of horns followed them. The hunt was everywhere. Kale's eyes scanned the ground, searching for a path. At last he spotted a crumbling stairwell leading down toward the river. They hurried down, but before they reached the bottom, a shout rang out. "There, by the stairs!" Soldiers charged, their blades gleaming. Leora froze, terror flooding her. Kale stepped forward, placing himself between her and the advancing men. The first soldier lunged. Kale caught his arm and twisted, sending him crashing into the wall. The second swung his blade. Cale ducked, the steel slicing the air above his head. He struck back with a fist. The soldier stumbled. Cale grabbed the fallen blade and held it in shaking hands. Leora watched, her chest heaving. Cale was not a soldier, not trained for war, but every move he made carried raw determination. He fought not with skill, but with will. Every strike was fueled by the promise he had made her. More soldiers rushed toward them. Cale's face was grim. His arms ached, his breath heavy. He fought with everything he had, but he was only one man. The breaking point was here. "Run," he shouted, his voice fierce. Leora shook her head. "No, I can't leave you." Tears burned her eyes. Cale's gaze locked onto hers. "If you stay, we both die," he said. His voice broke with urgency. "Run, Leora, live." Her body trembled. Her heart screamed to stay, but his words cut through her fear. With one last look at him, she turned and fled down the stairs. Her chains clinked as she ran. Her tears mixed. With the rain, Cale faced the soldiers. His blade raised. He struck, blocked, and staggered. The force of their attacks drove him back, but he refused to fall. His eyes burned with fire. His voice roared through the storm. "You will not have her." At the bottom of the stairs, Leora reached the riverbank. The water churned violently, swollen by rain. The current roared like a beast. She hesitated, fear gripping her heart. But behind her, the clash of steel and the cries of Cale filled the air. She stepped into the freezing water. The current seized her, dragging her forward. She gasped, fighting to keep her head above the waves. The river tore at her, pulling her under, but she kicked and struggled. Her body screamed with pain, but she clung to the thought of freedom, to the memory of Cale's voice telling her to run. Above, Cale's strength began to falter. A soldier struck his shoulder, pain ripping through him. Another slammed into his side, forcing him back. He bled. His vision blurred, but his grip on the blade never wavered. He roared again, striking with the last of his strength. Buying Leora precious moments, the soldiers pressed harder. Their blades flashed in the rain. Cale stumbled, his body at its limit. His breath came ragged. His heart pounded with fire and fury. He knew he might not survive, but if Leora made it, across the river, it would be worth it. In the river, Leora's body was battered against rocks, her arms burned as she clung to a floating branch. She coughed and gasped, her vision blurring, but her spirit refused to give in. She forced herself. Onward, the far bank was close. So close, Cale, bleeding and broken, gave one last cry. His blade swung wide, scattering the men before him for a heartbeat. He staggered back, his body collapsing against the stone wall. His chest heaved, his vision dim. But through the storm and chaos, he prayed she would make it. Leora pulled herself onto the far bank, collapsing onto the mud. Her body shivered, her hands scraped raw. She turned back, staring across the roaring river. Torches flickered on the opposite shore. Soldiers swarmed the stairs, but Cale was nowhere in sight. Her heart broke. A sob tore through her chest. But as the rain fell harder, she pressed her forehead into the wet earth, whispering, "I'll live for you." Her tears mixed with the storm, her body weak, but her spirit unbroken. The hunt had driven them to the river. The fight had nearly taken everything. But in that moment, Leora knew one truth. Cale had given her freedom, and she would not let it be wasted. The forest on the far side of the river was silent and dark. The trees rose high like black towers, their branches heavy with rain. Leora staggered forward, her clothes soaked, her body trembling. Each step felt like carrying the weight of the world, but she refused to fall. She pressed her hand against her chest, whispering Cale's name. Behind her, the river roared like a wall between two worlds. On the far bank, torches burned, soldiers searched the shoreline, but none dared to cross the raging water at night. The horns still sounded, but their fury could not reach her here. For the first time, she was beyond their grasp. Leora stumbled deeper into the forest. Her breath came in short gasps. Every shadow seemed alive, every sound like a hunter creeping. Closer, she found a hollow beneath the roots of an ancient tree and collapsed inside. Curling into herself, she shook from cold and grief. Her tears slipped silently into the mud. She closed her eyes, and Cale's face came to her. His scarred hands, his steady eyes, his voice telling her to run. She had run, but he had stayed behind. The image of soldiers swarming him, of his body falling beneath their blades, burned in her mind. Her chest ached as if a knife were still, twisting inside her. "I'll live for you," she whispered, clutching the cloak he had given her. "I'll live no matter what." The promise gave her strength, fragile but real. Through the storm, she drifted into restless sleep. When dawn broke, the forest glistened with mist. The world was quiet, but her heart still thundered. She rose, her body sore, and followed the sound of birds deeper into the wild. She drank from streams, ate bitter roots. Every step carried her farther from the city, farther from chains, but never from the memory of Cale. Days passed. Her body weakened, but her spirit held. She built small fires, hid beneath fallen branches, and kept moving. Yet at night, when she closed her eyes, she saw him. His voice was the only thing that kept her from surrendering to despair. Then one night, as the moonlight spilled silver across the forest floor, she heard footsteps. She froze, her heart racing, expecting soldiers, expecting hounds. She pressed herself against a tree, holding her breath. The shadows shifted, and a figure stepped into the clearing. It was him, Kyle, battered, bleeding, but alive. His cloak was torn, his face bruised, yet his eyes burned with the same fire as before. Leora gasped, covering her mouth. A cry broke from her throat as she ran to him. He caught her in his arms, his body trembling with exhaustion. "You're alive," she whispered, her voice breaking with joy. He nodded weakly, his forehead resting against hers. "Barely," he said, his breath rough. "But I promised you wouldn't be alone." His arms tightened around her, holding her as if the world could not tear them apart. Tears streamed down her face. She pulled back just enough to look into his eyes. "Why didn't you run sooner?" she asked, her voice full of pain. He gave a faint, weary smile. "Because I had to make sure they believed I was dead. It was the only way to follow you." The truth struck her like lightning. He had endured the unthinkable, risked everything, not just to free her, but to stay with her. She pressed her forehead against his chest, her tears soaking his torn shirt. "You're a fool," she whispered, "but you're my fool." Cale chuckled softly, though his voice cracked. His hand brushed her cheek, rough but gentle. "And you," he whispered, "are worth every risk." The forest around them was quiet, but the danger was not gone. Karen's law would never forget them. To the city, she was a fugitive, and he was a traitor. Their love was against the law, but neither cared. They had already chosen. Together, they built a small shelter deep in the forest. They shared food, fire, and silence. Cale's wounds healed slowly, but his spirit never wavered. Each night, Leora lay beside him, her head against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. It was the sound of freedom, but peace could not last forever. Patrols sometimes wandered into the forest, searching for traces. Cale trained her to move, quietly, to hide, to survive. They became shadows among the trees, hunted but never caught. Every day was a risk, but every day together was worth it. One evening, as the sun dipped low, painting the sky in gold and crimson, Leora sat beside the fire. She looked at Kyle, his face lit by the flames. "Do you regret it?" she asked softly, breaking there. "Laws for me." Cale shook his head, his eyes steady. "The only regret I have," he said, "is that I didn't do it sooner. You were never a punishment, never a debt. You were always worth saving." His words wrapped around her like a shield. Leora leaned forward, her lips brushing his. The kiss was soft, trembling but full of fire. It was not born of desperation, but of choice, of two souls who had found each other in the darkest night. The wee horns of Karen still sounded in the distance. The city still searched, the law still hunted. But in that forest clearing, with firelight dancing around them, none of it mattered, because the girl who had once been sentenced to shame was now held in arms that saw her as more than chains, and the man who had been nothing more than a janitor had become her protector, her partner, her love, against the law, against the world. They chose each other, And in that choice, they found freedom.